Welcome back for another update on the refit of Marcelina, my Reliance 44 sailboat. Last time I showed you how I was replacing some of the wet and rotted coring material in the deck. I had removed the rotted core and epoxied in a new synthetic core material. What I didn't show was the four-part process of replacing the original fiberglass top skin to complete the repair. First, epoxy the original top layer of decking that had been removed to access the rotted core to the new core. Once that's cured, grind the seam around the perimeter with a 4-inch angle grinder so that you're almost down to the new core at the seam, and so you have about a 2-inch bevel on either side of the seam. Then lay 4-inch wide strips of fiberglass over the seam and epoxy them in place. This hides the seam and, more importantly, makes for a strong bridge across the seam so you maintain much of the structural integrity of the original work. Finally, thicken some epoxy with filler that acts as a fairing compound, apply to the seam area, and sand it smooth after it sets. For more detail on this process, I recommend a YouTube site called Boatworks Today, specifically his video, Fiberglass Core Replacement. You'll find the link in the comments below. One area that was challenging was the vertical surfaces in the cockpit, including the cockpit combing here. You can see here that I've removed the top layer of fiberglass and then removed the wet, rotted core material that was behind it. It was difficult to put the synthetic core material in behind here because of the access to it. So what I've done, as you can see here, is I put the top skin back in place and then poured a 2-part rigid urethane foam behind it to act as the new core material. The rest of the process is just the same, from grinding to fairing to sanding. Also, last time I showed you the replacement of the floor supports. Since then, I've tabbed the new supports to the hull and painted them. I've also applied a white bilge paint to keep the bilge bright and clean. This not only looks good, but it repels oil and dirt, so it will make these areas much easier to clean in the future. Also replaced all the plumbing on the boat with a combination of reinforced tubing and PEX. I like the PEX because it's simple to work with, color-coded, and all the components are easy to come by. Now I'm waiting on some parts for the main water pump before reinstalling it. I'm also installing a new pump and sprayer at the anchor locker so that I can spray down the anchor chain and anchor as they're being retrieved. Finally, you may remember my work in removing the old rusted chain plates. Well, I've begun work replacing the steel structure that spreads the load of the chain plates throughout the hull. Instead of replacing it with steel that can rust, I'm using an engineered epoxy fiberglass material called G10. It's extremely strong and it won't corrode. I started by filling in the depressions where the steel was with epoxy and fiberglass in order to provide a flat surface for the G10, which I had pre-cut to size, to mount to. Once that's epoxied in place, I covered the 3/4 inch thick G10 with 6 layers of 1708 fiberglass cloth, which covers an area of about 4 square feet. This not only gives me nearly 2 full inches of solid fiberglass to bolt the chain plates to, but it spreads the load over a large area. I've cut some 1/2-inch marine-grade plywood as a subfloor and just set them in place to make working in the boat easier. Once most of the electrical runs are complete, I can secure the subfloor and another contractor can begin work on building the interior cabinets. The next big task is to replace virtually the entire electrical system. For this, I'm going to enlist the experts at the marina to help me. I'll be replacing everything except for the batteries, the alternator, and the inverter for small amounts of AC power that I'll need. It's going to be a long, hot summer, so I had better get to work. See you next time.